It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with our guest co-host today, Katherine Woodward Thomas. For those of you who don't know Katherine, she's an incredible friend of the show. She's a remarkable writer and a workshop leader with her teaching partner, Claire Zammit, of the Feminine Power workshops. And she's joining us today as a guest co-host. Thanks for joining us, Katherine.
Oh, it's just a joy to be with you.
It's always fun.
Thank you for
We always
having me.
wander into something juicy and interesting, and so I'm thrilled we have a chance today to share with our listeners a little bit of our experience. So last time we had you on, just to kind of lead in, we were talking about an emerging gender roles, an emerging a new relationship for men and women, personal relationships, but then also how we interact in public, in various job settings. And there's this whole evolving way that what has been clearly is not working for a lot of folks. Mm-hmm. And ultimately going forward, we're going to have to find something yet undiscovered that is more in line with some really important aspects of masculine and feminine, expressed in both men and women.
Yeah.
Not necessarily gender specific, though clearly comes out in different ways in our gender, in men and women. But it's all moving. There's a lot of moving parts going on right now.
And we are the ones who are here to bring that which is new forward, and we don't have a lot of role models for how to do this, and so we're all kind of finding our way together. So these are really critical conversations to be engaging, for sure.
The sacred wandering and wondering.
Oh, that's a great way to say that. So, if we look at things from a larger perspective, in the feminine power work that Claire and I have developed, we're noticing really in the last 50 years, we're part of this larger emergence story, and in the last 50 years, women have really risen to power in unprecedented ways, in really throughout the course of recorded human history.
Right.
We've never had as much leverage. I mean, we Western women are the most privileged, the most educated. We have more time, more leverage, more power than any other women in recorded human history. And yet, the startling thing that we noticed when we started to do this work, it was that the women's unhappiness levels have been rising too.
Yeah.
So when we really looked at that, we started to really notice that, inside of, we kind of en masse went into the masculine to break through those barriers of oppression that had been holding us back.
When you say we, you're saying women went into taking on what were traditionally masculine roles in order to break, and masculine traits, a kind of a doing and a kind of a way of thinking.
Yeah, well, we had to, and I'm going to say we. I was a little girl when this was happening, but we had to. Gloria, Betty, all those women, because the time, it was really assumed that women were not as smart as men, and that they wouldn't be able to take positions, other than secretary and waitress, or flight attendant, nurse, exactly. Teacher was another one, and that was kind of it for women's professions. Yep. So there was, and the rules of engagement had been firmly established over thousands of years. So in order to break through the barrier, women kind of had to just jump right in, as though masculine ways of doing things, masculine ways of knowing and being and thinking and showing up were something we'd always done. And God bless all those women who did that, because they really did it.
Well, and those of us that are children of the era of this all coming apart. I mean, we mentioned this in the last show. My mother married my father under a certain pretense. And then in 1973, she announced that she was going back to school. She was a nurse who gave up her nursing to bear children, 3 children, and to raise children. And then in 1973, my mom said, I want a career. I'm going back to school.
Wow.
And it was a big deal. And my mother then went on and became not just a sort of good occupational therapist. She became a leading child development specialist in Northern California, writing articles, creating a private practice. And my dad saw himself going from the breadwinner and the leader of, our family to really being, she had a much more financially successful career. She had a much more rewarding career. My dad was trudging along, whereas my mom was excited and having fun with this whole thing. And it threw our family into crisis. Now, my folks stayed together. Most of my friends' families, when mom decided she was going to, whatever it was, burn her bra or whatever the statement was, I'm going to go out and have my own life, did not survive. In my era, we saw the divorce rate shoot up. We saw all manner of fallout from this, what I'm going to say was a necessary breakdown, because a breakdown precedes a breakthrough. I mean, oftentimes things kind of have to come apart in a particular way. So I think this is something that is so much a part of, that so many of us, and this is what the point I want to get to, are in the breakdown of it still. We're still in the struggle of it. We're still in the idea that it's a battle of sexes. And that's the piece that I see needing to come to an end.
Well, and I think that a lot of women really felt that this was kind of, the final frontier, and so then when we began to be so unhappy and it started, the New York Times study, which I think is an exaggerated study, but 51% of us are living alone without a partner right now, adult women. So, and that's been a little bit pushed back upon how they did that statistic, but it's a very, very high percentage. So there's been a tremendous cost in terms of like the quality of our lives and the quality of relatedness. And, traditionally in any society, also when women have really come into equal power with men and they're no longer dependent economically on men, divorces do tend to increase.
You bet.
Tremendously.
What's my role?
I don't. Well, they're not having to stay in bad relationships.
Yes, that's
either,
true as well.
So there's freedom, there's choices, there's so there's a lot of things. But I think the point of what I'm trying to say is that was never meant to be an end point. That we're in an evolutionary story, and that right now what's awakening, this whole thing about the return of the feminine. Well, that's all of us beginning now to scoop in some of these qualities of the feminine that we're longing for, relatedness and care and nurturing and well-being and intuitive knowing and creativity and, really the things that kind of make your life worth living.
Oh, it's the juiciness that makes things fulfilling. There's a quality in the things that we're doing, the meaning, the purpose. This feminine aspect gives the doing context. Without it, and we see this all over the place. There are factories in China producing, endless amounts of stuff that no one really knows why we're making it. Like we're filling stores with stuff that nobody needs. No one ever thought through, is that a good idea? Because it's just this perpetual, we got to keep creating, we got to keep doing. I feel it. If I take a day off, I go into a funk. I don't know how to create space for myself. I'll raise my hand, first person to say, look, I need to be able to create the space for the inspirations to come in, for the whatever is underneath the doing that gives it a reason for doing it in the first place.
Beautifully said. So we talk about how, in a world where the masculine is divorced from the feminine, you're going to have us all pursuing accomplishment for accomplishment's sake.
That's it.
As opposed to accomplishment in service to creating deeper levels of care and well-being in our world.
Beautifully said. And in terms of that being a new paradigm, that, it's interesting. I won't even track back a little to the idea that the battle and all of the fighting to get to where we are, that what I think many people are struggling with is they're still in the mindset that there's a battle. I think there are so many men who would love an invitation to have a common ground and to come meet the part of themselves that is missing in the relation with themselves, but also in a relationship with a woman. I think that most men out there, I don't know if most, that's a huge, because many men are locked in. Don't get me wrong, I get where they're locked into the battle, just like many women are locked into the battle. But it's time to put the swords down. It's got to be an invitation to meet somewhere. I hope that this show is an invitation. That's what I want this to be.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, so the women are now, doing some work to integrate.
Yeah.
And the women are now kind of leading the way, because many of the things that we've been kind of cultivating for generations now, our capacity to extend care, the ability to kind of read the field and see and what needs to happen in order to create well-being. These are all the skills that are out now needed in the workplace.
Their capacities, intuition, all these pieces of their capacities.
It's the new model of leadership
Absolutely.
That's really coming in and necessary in today's marketplace. So, but what's happening, I think, is the dislocation of men.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about this article that Hannah Rosen wrote, The End of Men, which is really about men's sense of dislocation. So, that's and what's unacceptable to us is we can't now indulge this such a simplistic view as, okay, well, we went from overvaluing the masculine and devaluing the feminine, and now we're just going to overvalue the feminine and devalue the masculine.
Yeah.
We're talking about an integral power.
Absolutely.
We're talking about integral within ourselves and learning how to be in relationship with each other where we're feeding power to each other. And we've been divided with the masculine and the feminine within ourselves, so it's not surprising that we've been warring with each other. Maybe,
that's the mirror effect.
Right, and as we start to integrate both of these things so that our heads are informed by the feelings in our bodies, we're not just overriding them, that we're actually, valuing times of uncertainty, letting the field stay fallow so that we can gestate things to fruition, also just valuing that process.
Absolutely.
The internal process of life as well. Then I think we're going to be able to find each other.
Well, and this goes back to something we said the last time you were here too, that it's an individual call. That it's not, that again, when we project it out and we're doing it, it's okay, and say that's great, but then we got to drill down for ourselves and just note in our own lives where we fall into the old programming. And whenever we repair meaning put back together masculine, feminine, shadow, dark and light, so forth and so on, integrate these parts so they become an integrated and therefore trustworthy person.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Integrated and therefore trustworthy.
Yeah, because I can trust someone that says, I don't know, but that open to finding out. I can trust someone who can say, this has been hard in my life. I can relate to that, and that then makes them trustworthy. Yeah, it's very important, and that changes everything. I know in the moments when I'm clear and I'm modeling my clarity, that I'm like a magnet, that I'm doing my work. It isn't even about the words. My kids pick up on it. Kids are actually brilliant. Kids are master teachers because, you've got a daughter.
I do.
There's no, you can't talk your way through this one, Mom. They read energy. They know. If you're conflicted, don't pretend if you're conflicted, they'll find a way in. If they want something, you're like, no, you can't have it. But the party is conflicted. They know you're conflicted. They're getting in there because that's what they do. They don't take you at your word. They take you at your resonance. They don't take you at your word. They take you at your resonance. What's really going on?
Isn't that great?
Yeah. Invite a 3-year-old in and they'll tell you the truth. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. The challenge is to be able to see where we lie to ourselves. Again, even going back to the child rearing analogy, is that what I was told as a kid, you don't feel that way. You don't. I was lied to, not in a way where people were trying to do something damaging. That was unintended, collateral damage. But now, as I'm learning to tell the truth to myself and model that, that's very exciting. Just on the level of what happens to kids who are raised with that kind of modeling that I don't know is...
Well, there's consistency with their own inner experience.
That's right.
And then what's matching up.
That's right.
And inside of, that common experience you had when you were growing up, because many of the adults, who raised us, many of our parents didn't have a whole lot of interiority.
No question.
They didn't have an understanding of, this is the evolutionary process. Even if we go back and look at the movies from the 40s, you see how two-dimensional it is. Oh, Joe, I love you. Oh, Mary, I love you too. It's just and then
but they did break in the song.
They happily ever after.
There's a little bonus.
It's we're so much more complex, and we're not even that, just a few years, down the line here, and we're so much more complex. We have a lot more complexity than our parents did, but that kind of dynamic in the home has a lot of us not trusting our own knowing. It's like it really separates you from your own knowing, and it's very hard to navigate life with any wisdom. Certainly it's hard to find your way to the fruition of your potentials and your real true destiny without being able to be very, very connected to your inner guidance system and your own inner knowing.
That's it. And what happens over time, and you and I can speak to this because I know both of us have learned to rely more on these capacities and then go to places where we know we're expanding our capacity. Sometimes you just call this taking risks.
Always. It's the whole relationship to life has to be really at this time. If you really want to realize your full potentials, everything has to be developmental.
Yeah.
So, even like the breakdowns, even breakthroughs, like, what did I do to just create that breakthrough? What skills do I need to now cultivate in order to really make sure that I'm able to generate that even more? And certainly the relationship to breakdowns, instead of something's wrong or I'm an idiot or, gosh, how do I, get this to never happen again? It's just like, wow, what's the opportunity for growth and development? Where do I need to grow my capacities? What's this showing
it's so
me?
good. Barnett said to me the other day, we were talking about one of my triumph stories. He's like, great, Freeman, now it's time to tell a different story. And I was like, you're so right.
Oh, he nailed you. Isn't that great?
Yeah, but it was beautiful because we both have been really calling each other on, like we have this moment, it's profound, and then we want to hang on to it and lock it in. And that's not the point of it. It's far more dynamic than that. It's ever changing. So what's true today may or may not be true tomorrow. So we just hold it with that level of it's not so precise. It gets to be a bit ambiguous. That's great. This is what we go back to the idea that consciousness allows for dynamic complexity. That things are both true and not true simultaneously. Our consciousness is big enough to see all of them and then make really wise choices.
Wow.
Right?
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
No, I just love that, being able to hold the greater levels of complexity. I mean, I think that's the capacity that we are all needing to develop right now.
That's what consciousness is.
Yeah.
It's an awareness of the edges and all the various moving parts of things, so that we're not. I love it in science too. That what we have an old science and a new science, and they're both true. Congratulations, you can prove them both. Here, let's do a scientific project. See, gravity, it really works. Look, gravity is not that big of a deal. You can do both.
Ken Wilber says that all the time. Everybody's right about something.
Yes,
that's what you're saying. So it's include and transcend. Include and transcend and just keep expanding. But, there was a study back in the 50s about genius. They were trying to understand what constitutes genius. So they studied, like, across the board, all these different things it could be, and they found one thing that was a through line for all the geniuses they were studying, and that was the ability to hold opposites, polar opposites and paradox without needing to resolve.
That's fantastic.
Too quickly.
That's fantastic.
Until they could actually expand their consciousness to hold the complexity of all of it.
Well, that is beautiful, because from my perspective, those moments of genius, perfect moments, are not something you can plan. There's something you arrive at. And it has to do, again, I talked about in terms of the space between people. It's the space between us that gets filled, wherein we get to find something yet undiscovered. The genius is something, something's called happy accidents. Like, you think you're doing one thing, and you turn around and go, oh my gosh, that wasn't what we were doing at all. This is the thing we're doing. And that's so brilliant. But we never would have seen that. We couldn't. Right. And if we're so fixated on goals, then this is why I teach a lot of this stuff it's not the goal. When someone says I have a goal, I say, great, what's the quality in that? If we can tease out the quality and begin to promote the quality, then you can have that goal or myriad other things. But the quality is what matters, because if we tease out the quality and we begin to find expression for the quality, then all manner of possibility unfolds. Who knows what's going to happen? That's where genius happens.
Yeah, it's
right?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So this is great. So we're in this engagement, this inquiry, like where are we going next? And certainly, where are we going next as men and women together who are challenged to co-create the world in partnership together? Claire and I have been engaging this Women on the Edge of Evolution series, with teleseries, which has really been inviting extraordinary women, thought leaders and agents of change, scientists, artists, and
our friend Barbara Marx Hubbard
and
others,
Alanis Morissette has been an amazing guest. Marianne Williamson, Jean Houston, Lynn McTaggart, like really amazing women, just engaging. Like, what's our role as women in co-creating the future of our world? But I think what's emerging in the last few months is the need to engage this with men and women too. And how do we form partnerships, co-creative partnerships where we start to value the gifts that the masculine is bringing to the table for objectivity and rationality and being able to break things down into analysis, and also scooping in the intuitive part that the women have been cultivating for so many years.
And it's the dance. It's the dance in between us. It's the dance.
And integrating both of these within ourselves too. You know, one of the things, you know, a lot of people think that just, you know, this is on a personal level to make our personal relationships work better. There's a lot at stake in our world in general, in our ability to do this. One of the things that I love to talk about or just cite is that there was I read an article a few years back it was the author had gone and interviewed many of the engineers who had made the initial decision and created the design of how to bury nuclear waste into the earth. And the big breakdown that the author was citing was that, you know, there's no human language or human symbol that has survived for longer than 10,000 years. So, you know, our skull and crossbones that we think is so universal, we could put that on this container, and that somehow in 20,000 years, 30,000 years, people are going to come across that and not open it. They're going to be there. I mean, they might think that that's like a happy face. They don't know what that symbol means. There's no language or symbol that has survived that long. So now we have this big problem, this big ethical problem. And so she went back and she interviewed the engineers who thought that every single one of them admitted in private that they had a bad feeling about it. But nobody else seemed to be speaking up, and so they went along with it because nobody was articulating that. But every one of them felt in their body intuitively, this is not a good decision. So that's what's at stake for all of us, to begin to value the not knowing and to value body knowing, somatic knowing, intuitive knowing, and you know, to scoop in and rethink, you know, and to value both the best of what the masculine has to offer and the best of what the feminine has to offer. And to see the evolution as not just moving now from the masculine to the feminine, but it's to move both the masculine and the feminine to a higher stage of development, meaning that we're moving out of concern for me and mine and my little world, like an ethnocentric masculine, feminine, to a world-centric.
We're moving from what you can get to what you can give.
Exactly.
And the giving is an opportunity to share something that is uniquely ours. That's what calls us all to do our work, is that I have something unique that the world desperately needs. I think Marianne Williamson is the first person I heard say that.
She did,
But also, you know, all of those people, many of them have been on the show. Gene Houston's been on the show, Lynn McTaggart, Barbara Marx Hubbard, of course. They've all said very similar things, like this is a point of evolution where we have to make choices. And there's a perspective shift going from a evolution by choice rather than by chance, that we now are owning capacities and taking ownership and responsibility, meaning the ability to respond for our own worlds.
Right.
That's the call to action.
So let's start with an intention to really to cause like a whole new level of liberation and create co-creative partnership between men and women, and find out where that intentionality leads us and what we need to give up and what we need to start to become and to cultivate in order to fulfill upon that.
Yeah, and it's one choice, and it's today. It's the next choice I can make. It's one choice, and it's today. Because when we get too big with it, we blow ourselves out. When we understand the impetus behind that and we say, I'm committed to growing and changing in this particular way. Great. Now, one choice. Super. I love it. One choice right now. What
like
are you
who you're being, the actions you're taking, the choices you're making.
In the present.
Right. Is it consistent with that? Bring it into your actual lived experience. Brilliant.
And with all of that brilliance, we're going to say goodbye. Listen, if you enjoy Katherine, I invite you. Well, let me do a little more than invite. I urge you to check out her work. This is, forgive me, Katherine, it's www.femininepower.com.
Yeah,
that's it, femininepower.com. And the work she does with Claire Zammit, who is in her own right brilliant. The two of them are just magnificent together. I highly, highly recommend you check them out. And I highly recommend, if you enjoyed this, you pass it on to friends. And please keep coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Thanks for listening.